Hugh Hewitt, good morning to you. On the Washington Post this morning, the lead story: as U.S.-China rhetoric grows harsher, new risks emerge with Taiwan drawn into the mix. It is a Jerry Hsu, Eva Dow, and Ann Guerin comprehensive story on a long list of growing tensions, including yesterday's press conference by Mike Pompeo, which opened with a long list of complaints by the Secretary of State about China, including what the Chinese Communist Party has done to obscure and delay response to the global pandemic. I am joined by Lieutenant General Steve Kwast, who is the former commander of air education and training. He's also an expert on the PRC, responding to the PRC, big advocate for Space Command. Good morning, General Kwast. Good to have you back on the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You've been warning for a number of years that tensions between the PRC and the U.S. were not out in the open, but they were growing. Are you surprised by the very sudden turn they've taken into center stage spotlight? And I mean, there's no doubt about it, we're in a showdown.
Yeah, no, there's no surprise whatsoever. This is a classic page out of their strategy that they articulated 30 years ago. So nobody who's paying attention should be surprised.
So what is that strategy that they articulated? What should we expect from them in the coming weeks, months, and indeed couple of years?
Well, we can expect that they will take advantage of anything that's going on in the global environment, whether accidental or intentional, to try to cripple our economy. The strategy essentially is to dominate information, and 5G we've talked about before is part of that strategy, and dominate energy, and using space as the primary platform or geography to be able to paralyze other countries economically.
I'm going to come back to space in just a second. There is a Wall Street Journal story this morning, General Kwast, that a new coronavirus outbreak in China has prompted a limited lockdown. It's in Jilin City and a suburb of it, Shulan. How much should we believe the stories on the extent and prevalence of the virus in China? I mean, I actually don't think we have any visibility at all into that country.
Well, it's true. It's part of this age-old truth that information dominance is the beginning of all control. And when you have a country that entire existence from the party's sense of perspective is control, that information is the first step. So the Chinese people, as we've said before, Chinese people are beautiful. The Chinese people need to be part of the world community. The Communist Party is a threat to Western civilization. It always has been, and information. And so you can't trust anything that you hear out of China until we get ground truth that we see the facts ourselves.
General Kwast, one of the things that you've talked about is that if we have a conflict with China, first shots will be fired way, way above our heads, up in space. How would that unfold? What would be the first thing that people should say, uh-oh, about?
Well, and here is why China is such an important competition to focus on, is that they are very clever and they are very subtle. And their goal, they learned from Pearl Harbor. They do not want to wake the great giant. And even right now with the coronavirus, they're worried that they have awoken America. And that's why they try to propagate this lie that the coronavirus was delivered by the American military. And there's still many people in the world that believe that because of China's One Belt, One Road and 5G network and their ability to put people on boards of directors and in the corporate boardrooms of companies around the world. But this really, the first shot will not be heard with China, as opposed to Russia and other cultures that are more aggressive and more out there. China wants to strangle America as they go out economically with a whimper. This is an economic war, and China will back off before it comes to blows unless they feel like it is fait accompli, where there is nothing we can do, that their slow-growing vine around the spinal cord of the American economy is sufficiently suffocated our capability to respond. Only then would you see them go to violence. Otherwise, they do not want to wake us. They want us to go out quietly.
It's a little bit late for that now, isn't it, General? Have we passed the point of no return in terms of transparency as to the conflict? And I say that fully aware that I read Dr. Kissinger's book and Graham Allison's book and Michael Pillsbury's book. They have a tendency to strike out boldly and with ferocity, and they did so when they shelled Taiwan, when they joined the Korean War, when they invaded Tibet, when they attacked India, when they attacked Vietnam. They have a Tiananmen Square, most recently Hong Kong. They have this history of sudden outbursts. Are we at the flashpoint for one of those?
It's very hard to tell for the same reason you pointed out, that you don't know what you can trust. You don't know the information. You don't know what is in their mindset and what they are experiencing with regard to their own perspective. But I will tell you this, that it is not too late. America still has not only tremendous competitive advantage, but this is why so many of us have been crying for so long for the American people to pay attention to this, and for the politicians to finally get their act together and start focusing on this great competition with China economically. And it's because you cannot predict when they are going to react, because you have no insight into the inner sanctum of Chinese thinking, because they try to control the information. So the preparing for the unexpected is one of the key attributes of our military to protect our economy, our government, and our sovereign soil and our people. And right now, we are not prepared for the unexpected, but we could be if we would focus. So for me, the one thing we have to learn out of this coronavirus is that if we allow our space industry and our space activities to be crippled because of China taking advantage of this coronavirus to hurt our economy, then they will have the upper hand, because whoever controls the high ground of space will control information and will control energy, because they control a neural network that will be able to compete with anything we build terrestrially within our continental United States.
I see that the Teddy Roosevelt has set sail from Guam. It's back at sea after its coronavirus-induced port call that extended for many weeks. How reliant is a carrier on space material and information?
Totally. I mean, you take away space, and there have been war games that have revealed this, and you can read about them. If you're interested in actually watching how these play out. But every war game we play where you take space away is a disaster. And so that's a wake-up call. Yet people try to flavor it and color it. And my favorite example of discontinuity intellectually is when they'll play a war game and it'll go totally south, because when you take away space, you take away your logistics. And they'll white card it and say, well, we'll pretend that the logistics is good. Now what's the outcome?
What's white carding it mean, General? They'll white card it. What does that mean?
You ignore it. In other words,
okay.
You're playing out a war game and you're failing because you can't get your logistics, your fuel, your water, your ammunition. You can't get your forces to the point you need to get them. And if you can't get them there, white carding means that the leaders of the war game will say, well, let's just pretend that all our stuff is there. Let's pretend we do have enough water, enough fuel.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know you could do that. I just finished rereading Citizen Soldiers, and if they had white carded logistics in Europe, Patton could have gotten to Berlin in 4 weeks. They ran out of gas. I mean, there's no white carding logistics.
Right, and so this gets to the mindset of human. It's human nature. So you have to just be aware of this. It's human nature. The people that are running the war games have been given the job to win. And if they can't win and this war game reveals it, it's very easy for people to try to justify and say, well, it's not our fault that we don't have logistics because this, that, and the other, and it'll take 10 years and so on. And so they tend to put a happy face on a bad story. And this is something that everybody should be looking at. Logistics, Alexander the Great said it too. Wars are won by logistics, or as Eisenhower said, amateurs talk about tactics, professionals talk about logistics.
So let me ask you to close this out, General. The first shot, we won't hear it. It won't be like the first shot in Sarajevo. It won't be like Germany invading Poland. We won't hear it. What will it look like if it occurs in space?
Silence. In other words, you're on your ship, you're in your tank, you're in your plane, and you can't hear anything. Nobody's talking to you. No, you can't talk to anybody else. and you're wondering why can't I communicate?
This
That
morning
will
that Israelis woke up, this morning, Israel's been in a cyber conflict with Iran for a couple of weeks, and people don't know this. This morning, Israelis woke up and Iran had hacked pretty much every internet access point, say, a warning, a surprise is coming. And that was in response for Israel shutting down their port, which is in response for Iran messing with their water supply. All of this,
Yep,
not a shot fired. It's all going on behind the scenes.
that's right. So you're exactly right. So one of the things the American people need to realize here is that our information infrastructure was never designed to be able to deal with an adversary like China, who is trying to dominate the information domain globally. And when we talk about infrastructure investment in the future, we as the American people need to demand that in this 21st century, protecting our information is as important as protecting our sovereign soil. Just look at how much dependency we have on our information, our banking, our medical, and it's all vulnerable because the internet is vulnerable by design. So it doesn't have to be that way. If America, for example, were to throw up the kind of satellites that gives us gateways to be able to communicate with American gateways designed with private-public partnerships with companies that have the capability, you can design information infrastructure that you can trust. It's just that we're trying to use the internet, and it was designed to be open and collaborative, and you will go bankrupt before you make the current infrastructure secure.
General Stephen Kwast, thank you. Always a pleasure talking to you, General. You got to get on Twitter so I can tell people how to find you. I appreciate the morning.